What's up guys, this is Neil and you have come back to High Gain Guitar Academy to learn how to do arpeggios and sweep picking. It's not a super easy thing, this sweep picking, but arpeggios are the ingredient, the key ingredient that will get you there. So there's going to be a lot of right and left hand technique. Let's get started with it. Now first of all, what is an arpeggio? An arpeggio is a broken chord, and that sounds bad, like it's busted. It's not busted, it's just broken up into pieces. So anything that's a chord that I break into separate notes qualifies as an arpeggio. If everything's played at once, that's a chord, that's an E chord, right? If I play the strings one at a time, that's considered an arpeggio, right? So arpeggios can be anything. They're not stuck to just being a chord. It can literally be any notes from a low note to a high note or in reverse, as long as they're one at a time in some sort of sequential order. Like here's just a random, right? That's an arpeggio. So you get the idea, right? Arpeggios are just a broken up chord. Now in rock and metal music, arpeggios are commonly associated with sweep picking. Now what is sweep picking? It's not where you get a broom and go over your guitar with it, okay? It's a technique where you use your pointer and your thumb holding your pick as you normally would, and you're going to do one smooth motion across whatever strings you're playing, and instead of like picking one at a time, it's just gonna be this one smooth motion. Let's use a bar chord to demonstrate the arpeggio and sweep picking techniques, okay? So let's get at the 7th fret of the A string, and we're gonna do a minor bar chord here. This is gonna be an E minor bar chord, not super important, but here's what we're gonna do. 7th fret across all the strings, except for the big E. So from the A string down, it's gonna sound like that. So now to make that minor bar chord, we're gonna add in the 9 of the D, 9 of the G, 8 of the B. Doesn't matter the order your fingers are in there as long as you have those notes, okay? Now I can pick those one at a time, and that does qualify as an arpeggio, but when I do the all one downward motion like a slow strum, that's more of a sweep picking technique, okay? And that's what I wanted to show you at first, just to get the strumming part with your picking hand, because once we have that smoother motion down, both ways, we want to go up as well. That's kind of like the building blocks for doing sweeps and, you know, these arpeggio sweeps that you hear all the, rock and metal guys doing. Of course, they're not limited to rock and metal. You can also find them all kinds of music, but hey, this is High Gain Guitar Academy and this is kind of what I listen to, so that's what we're going to talk about. So let's do a simple 3-string arpeggio sweep thing, okay? So it's just gonna be 3 strings. We're not gonna do one that uses all the strings in some crazy shape right away. We wanna start simple. We just wanna get the idea of the technique down, right? So we're gonna use 3 strings. We're gonna use what I call a stair-step shape. We're gonna put our ring finger on the 14 of the G, and then our middle finger on the 13 of the B, and then our pointer on the 12 of the little E. So you see we have sort of a stair step, 14, 13, 12, G, B, E, okay? So what we wanna do is that same downward single motion to strum all 3 strings, one at a time. Now it still sounds like a chord because the notes are overlapping and ringing out together. So what we wanna do is as I pass a string with my pick, I'm going to remove that finger, and then as it passes the next string, remove that finger. It's a little tricky, especially to not get extra noise as you let go of those other strings. So what you're gonna do is, I like to use the side of my palm, like a little bit of palm muting to help control that noise. And also, this is a hard to see thing and no one really ever points this out, but the tip of my finger as I'm holding out like the little E string here is touching the side of the B. It's actually muting the B. So as I leave a string, now I'm on the B string muting the G. And as I go to the E, I'm muting the side of the B. A lot of the time it happens so quickly when you're doing this motion in a song, you won't need to do that or see it, but if you're doing a slower broken up arpeggio, that might be a useful trick. No one ever talks about that, but that's a useful one, to just touch the sides of the strings you don't want to ring out. Okay, once we've reached the 12 of the little E, we're gonna use that pinky and we're gonna stretch all the way up to the 17 and up pick. We've done a smooth downward sweeping pick motion. Now we're gonna up pick on the 17. okay? So all we gotta do now to go backwards is pull off of the 17 back to the 12. Okay, again, when you do that pull off, use gravity. Gravity's your friend. Actually pull down and, kind of flick the string with your pinky. So now we're gonna go back the other way using an upward sweeping motion, hitting just the B and the G. So I'm gonna go back to the 13 of the B and the 14 of the G, doing an upward sweep. So once I've done the pull off on the little E, then it's just an upward sweeping pick over those two strings, the B and the G. Okay, so the whole thing together slowly. It takes a lot of control, this technique. It's not about being fast right as you learn it. Otherwise, you're just gonna rush through it and it's gonna sound like a sloppy, jumbled mess of notes that you can't untangle. So go slow. And we're just gonna use the 3 strings, and as you get better at it, we can incorporate in more strings. But for now, that's the ticket, just 3 and take it slow and work on the control of that picking, okay? That's gonna be the toughest thing, is to control the speed and accuracy of that technique. So now that we know that basic technique, we can change it up and do different shapes with it. It doesn't always have to be that shape. We can change it up, do different shapes, and the technique will basically remain the same, okay? So that was sort of a minor shape, like an A minor shaped arpeggio. What if we did like, let's see, what if we did like a diminished sounding one? That's pretty metal. Or we could do like a major shape, like it doesn't always have to be like mad or sad. We can do some happy ones. Notice how on those last two, because the common notes were under the pointer finger, I can do some barring for this one, And it's not that I'm always holding down those strings. Sometimes the pointer will lift up just to mute those strings, so I have a little more control over the notes. Especially when you're playing with high gain distortion, you have a lot of extra noise. So that muting that comes from sort of barring with my pointer finger is really helpful. That's another thing people don't talk about so much, but anytime you can use a barring technique to mute the other strings, I think that's super helpful. Now, you may notice if you ever, watch anything I play, I don't always do the up-picking sweep after I've done the hammer-on pull-off bit at the end. I prefer a lot of the time to do a hammer-on thing when I'm coming down. For some reason, that just works better for me. Maybe it's because I haven't spent enough time on the other techniques, but I've developed a strength for that. And while I'm always going to encourage you to try everything, at some point you're going to start to notice that you have strengths in certain areas, and this has become part of my technique that people have noticed me for, so I'll show you why I do that. So in the major shape I just showed you, notice that I never do the up pick. It's all just down with the up pick on the stretch note, but then it's all pull off hammer-ons, so I don't have to continuously be going back and forth. I can just keep doing the down note. For me, that just works, okay? You might find a different technique works better for you. I've never claimed to be a sweep master, but maybe you will be the next sweep master. But either way, arpeggios are the key ingredient here. And I think anytime you're playing something melodic, you're doing runs, finding arpeggios are, kind of gonna help to facilitate that. And keep in mind, guys, they don't always have to be in a box like these ones we've done. An arpeggio can stretch across most of the neck. Check this one out. I mean, that's like from here to here, and that was an arpeggio. It's like kind of a scale, kind of an arpeggio. But anytime you break up a chord of sorts into separate notes, it technically qualifies as an arpeggio. It's a fancy word. People are going to throw it around a lot. But the idea is that, broken up notes. That's what it is, okay? And then when you do the downward single picking motion followed by an up, those are sweep picking techniques, okay? So I think practice is the key here. Control is the key, okay? Control in your timing. We're not doing a bunch of really big moves. It's mostly very small and controlled moves. If you get online, you start looking around at sweep picking guys, that's like their thing, very controlled, okay? So if that's something you're really into, start with the techniques I've shown you today, and we can advance on that later. Okay? Hopefully this was useful. Good luck to you, sweep masters.